Breakout, citizens revolt against money power and the Gaza Effect. Coming up on today's Citizens Report. Welcome to the Citizens Report for the 14th of March 2024. I'm Elisa Barwick. Joining me today is Citizens Party leader and founder Craig Isherwood. Welcome, Craig.
Yeah, thanks, Elisa.
And on today's show, we've got two big breakouts to discuss, actually. One we got on the 7:30 report last night on our bank campaign, so that's big. And we're also going to talk about a regional Australian shire that has advanced plans for a public bank. So stay tuned for that. And then we'll talk about the Gaza Effect being the dramatic political land shifts that are occurring as a result of the horror that's being conducted and ongoing in Gaza. And
as it should.
Is causing a massive shake-up around the world, actually. Now, don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell. There's a lot of updates coming through thick and fast, which we'll keep you posted of. You can hit the like button, make a comment below and share on social media to help get the word out. And as always, we need your support to keep these campaigns going. Don't ask Craig about how much the trip to send Robbie to Tom Price cost. Don't bring it up. Let's not go there. No. But we always appreciate, I know a lot of people that are watching this will have already supported us. So thank you very much, and keep doing it. You can also subscribe to the Australian Alert Service as a way of supporting us and keeping yourself informed, and it gives you all the background information, and you can arm yourself for your next visit or phone call or email to your Member of Parliament. And we're going to be focusing a lot more on that in the coming period, as we'll talk about in the second segment of our campaigning approach and how we're really going to get some breakthroughs on all of our campaigns with an election upcoming. This is
the Robbie's in Tom Price at the moment, and he nearly didn't make it because flights got cancelled, but can't come back early because you're talking about huge one-way flights for $1,200. But he's there. We continue to. I think this is the 11th forum that he's been at with the senators. And the good thing about it is that he gets to speak with all sorts of people that we wouldn't ordinarily get to. So it's a very, very good investment in his time. I believe there's another hearing in Canberra coming up. There's another one in Bribie Island. So if you're watching this and you want to know about where the Bribie Island Forum is, then give us a call at some point.
And there's a Canberra one as well coming up.
The Parliament one. Yeah, that's right. So, the inquiry is still running for a few months yet, so people should still stay involved and keep doing things. Absolutely.
But we'll talk about that right now in our first topic: Breakout, citizens revolt against money power. Being on the ground at Tom Price was extraordinary. We'll come to those reports in a moment, but it's so worth being there and the discussions that can take place on the ground with some of the locals. And we wouldn't have even known about the big breakthrough we're going to talk about this local council that is actually in advanced stages of organising a public bank coordinated and run by local government. It's a big deal.
It's one of those stories, Elisa. We had a supporter, unfortunately she's in a nursing home now because of her age, for many, many years, it could be close to 20 years, living in Wittenoom, the last town before it was closed down by the government, who was on the Ashburton Shire. Right, so all of our ideas have been filtering through her for the last 20 years into this council, and then we discovered that they're making moves towards establishing their own bank up there because there is no banks in, I believe, the richest shire possibly in the world.
Yeah, well, this is a shire in the Pilbara region, which is where our entire iron ore wealth comes from. So here you have the Shire of Ashburton, which, Robbie just made the comment, Robbie Barwick, who's over there, of course, he said, look, this is possibly, I would not hesitate to say, the single greatest, or the shire with the single greatest wealth emerging from it, probably in the entire world, in terms of what the output that comes out of that area. Yep. And yet, in that entire shire region, not one physical bank branch. I mean, the banks aren't there because they can't turn a profit, supposedly. I mean, in that region, they've put a cap on lending of $300,000 to anyone in the region, and yet to buy a home, you're up for at least $1 million. Everything's exorbitantly priced.
This is an example of the private banks dictating policy.
Yeah.
Which is criminal. It's just wrong.
Absolutely. Now, we'll get into some of the details of those hearings, and there's some audio clips we want to play from the hearing itself. But let's preface it with the other breakthrough, which is the coverage last night, as I mentioned, on the 7:30 report. And that is coming out of this entire process of all these series of hearings of our fighting to get this regional banking inquiry in the first place, after it was after the whitewash that was the regional banking task force, which all the bank executives and Anna Bligh participated in, and just completely smoothed over the whole problem and gave the banks a green light to keep shutting down branches as long as they followed certain rules, which they're not even following, as we'll see when we hear from Matt Canavan at the hearing. But that whole process has finally erupted. We've had quite a bit of excellent mainstream media coverage on various TV programs and news reports, and a lot on radio. But this is the first time AB 730 report have not only covered this in a very serious way, but also included us and interviewed Robert Barwick for about an hour. And of course, you'll see a tiny snatch of, 20 seconds or something.
Yeah, no,
but nonetheless.
The Bankwest has done us an enormous favour by doing this. Unfortunately, shutting down 45 branches is tremendous carnage for people. But at the same time, they are so arrogant to do this. They make promises. They don't make promises to keep the branches open or whatever, because they're so blatant in the fact that they want to close them for commercial reasons. And they lie about it, as we've gone through many times on this show, that the fact that people want branches, but the bank's saying, oh no, it's a digital currency revolution, digital's taking over, therefore we're going to close branches. It's all BS.
Yeah.
And the rage what they're doing is they're now hitting people that normally would not be political, where it hurts.
Yeah.
And these people are starting to react, and they're saying, well, where's the government on this?
Yeah.
Where's the leadership on this? And now we've been fighting for all these different financial issues in the interests of the people, the common good, the general welfare, which is where our party comes from. So now we're starting to be picked up by news agencies like the ABC, because we are the authorities on this.
Yeah.
And that's what came through again yesterday.
The journalist that did this program, who did a very good job, wouldn't have had the story if she hadn't have been consulting with Robbie. So they can't really not cover us in a sense, even though there might be some editorial intervention to try to stop it. But at a certain point, you can't do the story without the lead, a figure in that story.
Well, Robbie mustn't get much sleep these days, because he's on speed dial with all these journalists from the boomer radio stations in Adelaide and 6PR in Western Australia, and they're all ringing 3 hours time difference. So they're all ringing him up, asking, "Can you come on the radio? This is just broken." There's no press. We used to do this by sending press releases out, and they'd respond.
Yeah.
But now
we don't even get to do it. They've already called us.
So as I say, mustn't get much sleep.
Yeah. So we'll run this 7:30 clip, which again, just the fact that Bankwest made this announcement, closing 45 branches, 17 of them in regional communities, the week before the regional banking inquiry was about to come to WA and go to Tom Price, is just extraordinary. But watch this.
It's a busy day at this bank in the inner Perth suburb of Wembley. Customers are rushing in before it closes for good.
I should be crying, not smiling.
I am really, really annoyed that they put money and profits before their customers.
Bankwest recently announced it's closing 45 of its branches across Western Australia, while 15 regional sites will be converted to Commonwealth banks.
But to read it in the paper, in the West Australian, before clients were told, no, appalling.
Where will you go?
I have no idea.
The bank's going all digital, but long-time customers, like Mavis, aren't ready to ditch cash.
Lots of years of saving there, with little bits for my grandchildren. But of course, my grandchildren are now digital bankers and they'll be inconvenienced. So it's a whole history going down.
Bankwest, a WA-based subsidiary of the Commonwealth Bank, made the announcement last week, citing changing customer preferences and claiming fewer than 2% of customers visit a branch regularly. But the union representing bank workers claims that's not the full picture.
When banks say customers are actually making these decisions, that's not 100% true. A lot of the customers are being driven to that by the bank's own behaviours.
Wendy Streets from the Finance Sector Union says these scanned documents sent to 730 show the bank has been pushing customers away from their bricks and mortar stores for years. She points to a 2020 job description for a teller role at Bankwest, which lists support migration initiatives as a key task and experience proactively migrating customers as a desirable trait, while a 2024 document of performance indicators lists digital migration as a KPI. She says the strategy is not unique to Bankwest.
It's actually our members' responsibility in their day job to actually start that conversation with the customers, tell them that they shouldn't be doing these transactions over the counter anymore. There's a more efficient and simpler way for them to do their banking, and they're going to show them how to do that. If they don't do that, they end up on performance-related issues with the employer. It is monitored every day.
In a statement, Bankwest told 730,
our company-wide goals are focused on helping our customers access simple and easy banking solutions. And it will always be important to educate our customers on alternative banking options safely and securely. And we receive positive feedback from many customers on the choice and convenience this offers them.
Across Australia, the number of total bank branches has fallen from about 5,700 in 2017 to just 3,500 last year. The number of ATMs has shrunk by 60%. The trend is really being felt in the country's regional and remote communities, including in the Pilbara town of Tom Price, which lost its only bank branch, a Westpac, over a year ago. It's caused headaches for local businesses like the Karajini Eco Retreat.
The reality is that not everybody's ready to switch to completely cashless yet. So there's dollars that we have to bank somewhere. So if the banks are going to withdraw from regional areas, those services need to be taken up by somebody so that we can actually continue to operate and take the risk off the properties for holding cash.
Tom Price residents say they now face a 700-kilometre round trip if they need to visit a bank in person, or some are flying to Perth with bags full of cash to deposit.
The reality was that the cash is still coming in and we're forced to take that cash all the way to Perth to deposit it, which is unacceptable really in this day and age. Major frustration and unrealistic risk for the person carrying the money.
Tom Price is the latest town to host a travelling Senate inquiry into bank closures in regional Australia. Today, the Ashburton Aboriginal Corporation was among those called to speak about the impact on locals.
The digital divide is huge. We have a lot of our communities that do not have access to reliable phone network, internet networks are lacking. That makes it very difficult for community members to access any online banking systems or use electronic payment methods.
The committee, chaired by Queensland Senator Matt Canavan, is expected to hand its report to the federal government in May. Some political parties are banking on branch closures becoming a federal election issue.
The only people who don't like it are the banks.
It's the number one focus of the little-known Citizens Party, which also has some controversial views like rejecting climate change hysteria, but is mainly pushing for a new publicly owned post office bank service.
We can make banking a service again.
The party's director, Robert Barwick, has travelled to WA for the Senate hearing.
Our party represents the citizens. We are frustrated that the reason we exist, we believe, is because the major parties too often represent vested interests and they leave the citizens behind.
This is a decision that's going to save the banks money. A lot of Australians are shareholders of banks. Can you really blame the banks for making a smart business decision?
You may be a shareholder, but you're related to someone who's being stiffed by what the banks are doing here. The day your grandmother gets ripped off $400,000 by some scammer overseas because she had to use online banking rather than the safety of a bank branch, is that shareholding going to be worth it?
Consider your customers and not your shareholders. And that goes for all the banks because they're all making huge profits. I weep every time I see for this quarter, they've made $1 million profit. And I think at whose cost?
And just to add to that, during the week that this hearing was taking place, NAB announced 3 more branch closures in New South Wales, Cessnock, Maria and Yass, and Westpac has announced they will close 4 of their, again it's like the Bank West Commonwealth Bank thing, they're closing 4 subsidiary Bank of Melbourne branches around Melbourne area, and they're going to co-locate their Newcastle branch, putting it in the Hamilton branch. So, you know, they try to make it sound like it's better than it is by co-locating, but it's closing another branch. So that's the backdrop to what we're about to go through now in terms of the hearing at Tom Price that took place. And we'll roll a few of these clips which are audio only, but as I said before we started the show, unless we put this out there, it doesn't get the exposure that it absolutely deserves to help build and fuel the campaign. Of course, the senators that are there are impacted by this in an extraordinary way. Some of them, like Matt Canavan, are at all the hearings. Others of them are only at 1 or 2 or 3, depending on where they're actually located.
One particular senator, was talking to Robbie about, to Robbie, and he made the point was, until I came onto these inquiries, I had no idea that this was going on. I had no idea of the impact of branch closures. And see, that's the thing that people have to realise, that if we're not in touch with their MPs telling them about this,
yeah, exactly.
In many cases, they have no idea about what's actually going on in many areas of the economy, of social life and so forth. And that's why this is why the Citizens Party is so serious about getting people to mobilise to go and talk to your MP. Just because they're in Parliament doesn't mean they're on some sort of pedestal.
No.
They're there to represent you. Go and tell them and let them know. Now, they might brush you off initially, but I can tell you they actually don't forget too much on important issues.
Well, that's right. And one of the issues that has come up at every hearing, and Robbie really highlighted how egregious this particular example was, and this is something that the senators were, rather struck by as well, comes to the fact that, here you have the banks closing branches and saying, oh, you can do that at Australia Post. But one of the things that comes up everywhere is that what they can't do is get Australia Post or Bank at Post to check their identity and change signatories on bank accounts and things like that, that procedural stuff, even despite the fact that Australia Post does all of that kind of identity checking for passports and working with children checks, and which requires police checks and everything. So they're entrusted with all the banking, but the banks themselves don't allow Australia Post to do that. So you come across so many examples. We had an example from Coober Pedy of, someone, I think from the Shire, that had to drive 5.5 hours to try and get his signature changed on for the account that they run, and couldn't do it because the bank manager wasn't there, and they said, come back tomorrow. Yeah, right, okay, I'm not going to make that drive again. Well, this particular example from Tom Price is a fellow who he volunteers on 6 or 7 different boards of different outfits, and one of them is the local softball club. And I mean, you just have to hear what he has to say. We'll just run that clip.
One of the most pressing issues is actually gaining and retaining access to accounts. Tom Price has quite a transient population. Generally, people are in town for 2 to 5 years. So as you would be aware, we have a large turnover in group committees. This creates the issue of changing signatories for the bank accounts. I'm currently going through this nightmare at the moment. In early 2022, I was elected Vice President of the Tom Price Diamond Club. I immediately noticed that the only signatories to the bank account were the president and her partner as the previous vice president. Noting the financial governance issue, we set about trying to change the signatories on the account. This was at a time when Westpac were open limited hours. So working shift work at the time, I found it very difficult to actually get to the bank when they were only open 1 to 2 days a week, and sometimes they didn't open at all. So we weren't actually able to change it while they were still open. We had 2 or 3 failed attempts over the phone. Every time we had different information that we needed to give. We almost ended up giving up. I eventually went to the Westpac branch in Perth and tried to get them, and they gave me some forms. We filled out the forms, gave them all the information, ID, etc., and then they said, "Oh no, now you've got to come into the branch." So then, at about the same time, the president of the association left town, was no longer available. She moved to Newman. So then we had the issue of them wanting us both, the new signatory and the old signatory, to be in the branch at the same time. So for her, the nearest bank would then be Port Hedland. So that's a 450k drive, 900 k's for her round trip, 800 k's for me round trip. So that also brings in to we're volunteers. We've got to pay that $300 or whatever with fuel to get there. Find the time to get together at the same time in Hedland. So yeah, that would easily, if you blew a tyre going over there, there's another $400 or $500 gone out of your own money. So until this issue is resolved, the current committee has no access in person or electronically to the funds, and the only person that has access is not actually authorised by the committee to use that funds. So we're actually in the process of going through another financial institution to open an account, and then we'll get their ex-president to transfer all the money into that account. We won't be able to close that account because we don't have access to it. So again, that's the issue. So these issues are indicative but not limited to what all the clubs in town are going through.
So, that's just, he's going to be up for a few $100 in fuel, and if he blows a tyre, even probably double that. But, they can't even make it happen because one of the ladies, as he said, has moved away. They can't do it at Perth. I mean, it's just, blockade after blockade of being able to do the most simple things. So that bank account is just going to sit in limbo because they can't even close it down. I mean, it's ridiculous. Yeah. Now, moving on to, I want to talk now about the solution, which is coming forward, as we mentioned, from the Ashburton Shire. So they've developed a very detailed financial plan, and they're pushing the local government association to get on board with this. And I want you to hear a couple of lengthy clips here, because they're not taking any shortcuts. I mean, they're deadly, deadly serious about getting this up and running. This is brilliant. So first of all, I'm going to run 2 brief clips from the local councillor in her opening remarks before she and others from the council were quizzed by the senators.
Through a sustained period of cuts and bank closures, a focus on profit to the exclusion of any consideration has meant that this essential service only applies to those Australians who live in cities and large regional hubs. In regional and remote Australia, our branches have closed permanently. This is a definition of a false economy, and one that is not equitable or fair. With the closure of the Westpac branch in Tom Price in late 2022, there is now no physical banking presence across the entire Shire. Our communities rely on the hard-working Australia Post proprietors who delivers transactional services through the Bank at Post system. In simple terms, no access to banking services and face-to-face banking staff results in no financial relationships or financial education, impaired financial literacy, less access to financial information relevant to credit assessment and decisions, making it less likely that credit will be approved, resulting in less mortgages, less business lending, and an unfavourable and untenable community experience. The domino effect can and is catastrophic to regional communities. Council believes there is no reversing the current trend of bank closures nationally, despite the effort of various inquiries and task force. Australia's bank are continue to focus solely on profit and retreat from our regional communities. Rather than dwell on what was, we look forward to what is possible. We believe that the current market failure in banking services in regional and remote Australia can be resolved through equitable, innovative intervention and support of experienced regional partners, including local government. We aim to ignite the conversation nationally to ensure we put our collective minds together, look forward with optimism and find sustainable, workable and robust solution to not only ensure community livability, participation and inequality, but to drive the prosperity of our communities across the nation. Council proposed that ALGA investigate the creation of a Local Government Bank of Australia, LGBOA, or similar, in which is operated in partnership with local government and other community-orientated entities that places community at the heart of its operation.
Now, in this next clip, you'll see that the CEO was then questioned, because we weren't sure whether the senators would come back to this question, but all the senators wanted to engage on this issue of this bank they proposed. They were quite enthralled by it. So just listen to this one question, because the detail that this is the CEO of the Shire Council, the detail he gave was extraordinary.
Just finally from me, Chair, just on the idea of a local government bank, can you just talk us through, you know, what's the level of discussion? Where have those discussions got to within WALGA and ALGA? You know, how strongly is this being looked at? Has a feasibility study been looked at? What's been done so far?
Thank you, Senator, Chairman. We've looked at the local government banking model on this basis. Every regional town has access to a local government service or a facility or a door or in close proximity to it. And we've got those capital services. The Shire did an initial scoping paper. We've then worked in with the University of Melbourne to actually put together the concept as, is this possible? We've met with the West Australian Local Government Association and also our Pilbara Zone, representing our 4 local governments in the region, but also the entire West Australian Local Government Association administration. And we've also now reached out to the Australian Local Government Association, of which we will also be given some speaking opportunities in Canberra later in the year for that presentation, where we can actually specifically address the issue to other local governments in regional Australia. Because this is a system, this is not a Shire of Ashburton banking model. This is a local government banking model across regional Australia, representing those 7 to 8 million Australians and those services. ALGA would need to actually take the paper that we're putting together and then add to that. And then there needs to be a vote amongst all the local governments that would be interested, and if there was an interest for that to happen. We've also looked at the issues associated with Kiwi Bank. We're actually looking at some of the American municipal opportunities and also some of the new innovations that are coming in through Germany in relation to municipal banking systems. So those components will be looked at to see what is a model. Is this a model that regional Australia can work with, where we're actually seeing withdrawal of those services from other centres. The concept is that the local government offices are the portal to a professional banking service. And the not-for-profit components that come from that, or the social licence, a bank makes profit, Senator. The social licences, where areas in the postcodes where banks are not wanting to actually invest, we would see the banking as a part of its establishment agreement, its constitutional rights, its legal obligations, to take perhaps higher levels of risk, to invest into communities and to invest into SMEs where other banking systems are not. So we actually provide the profit that comes back to the community, as Councillor Smith read into evidence earlier today. That's our fundamental issue that we're trying to do. Where a service is not provided, how can we actually provide those things? We've also looked at other issues, other products, including just the sheer cost of insurance. We haven't made evidence to that today, but is there opportunities for insurance costs to be managed with the federal government and local government to look at how we can actually affect people's livelihoods and their livability in the regions?
Now, then there was a great young fellow who runs the local licensed post office, and it was an interesting debate actually, because he seemed to be opposing this idea of having a government bank through the government departments, but in fact he wasn't. He was concerned, of course, because Australia Post has come to rely so much on bank at post, and he was talking about how so much of the service they provide is now bank at post. They're swamped, which was interesting that one of the senators, Senator Brockman, actually intervened to say that makes a lie of this whole line put out by the banks that, oh, we're closing because there's no demand for service. If you're saying it's a great demand for service for bank at post. So the thing is, he wasn't, this LPO fellow who's a member of the licensed post office group and so forth, and he's very passionate about a post office bank. So he preferred to see a post office bank. But in any case, he's happy, as you see in this clip, to work with whatever proposal, because as we've made clear, you know, wherever it operates, it can operate in multi-agencies. It can be all incorporated as a unified proposal. It's all public banking. I mean, if we're at the point where we're not debating whether a public bank is necessary, but what type of public bank and where it will operate, I mean, that's a major victory in and of itself. So that's great. So this is what he has to say.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, Senator Brockman. I just, before we wrap up for morning tea, I want to go back to your opening comments, Mr Hall, that you're worried a local government bank could be a competitor and somewhat threaten the services provided through Bank at Post. I suppose I wouldn't mind getting your thoughts on if there was to be a government bank, would you be a willing partner in that? Because I took from the local government's idea that was really going to be some kind of government bank created that may have facilities within local government offices, but there's no reason potentially why something can also be provided or instead provided through Australia Post offices. Would you be interested? Do you think you could have the facilities and expertise to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we, like I was discussing with my field engagement leaders, we are happy to work with anyone to provide the service to Tom Price. It's not something our business would usually focus on because, like I said, we are a transport and a event management company. But now that we're in this post office for the next 2.5 years, these discussions we're more than happy and comfortable to be involved in and set up a partnership to be able to bring these services to town and ensure longevity for future banking in Tom Price. So.
Okay, so now we're going to see Senator Matt Canavan prosecuting Bank West in the proper sense of the term, because of course these Bank West announcements of closures, as always with all of these banks, as we've seen through all the hearings, are always a fait accompli. Their so-called consultation is not consultation at all. They decide what bank branches they're going to close, and then they have a so-called consultation, which seems mainly, from what this Bank West guy was saying, mainly aimed at making sure the staff that lose their jobs are repositioned. That's one of the things they do take account of, fortunately, but it's certainly not enough. And so one of the senators started out asking Bank West about whether they follow the code that was enforced after the Regional Banking Task Force, which was the recommendations of the Regional Banking Task Force on how they have to consult the community before closing a branch were adopted into the Australian Banking Association Code, which you'll see referenced. And so they have to do impact statements and have consultations and so forth. But as Matt Canavan makes very clear, it is BS from top to bottom, which is why this inquiry is taking place, because everyone knew that was looking, knew that that Regional Banking Task Force was an absolute crock, and the ABA recommendations mean nothing. And that's why there's been open slather on bank closures from the close of that inquiry until now, and they'll continue unless we make a breakthrough. So this is a longish clip, but follow it through because Canavan, of course, is getting, as a lot of senators, very frustrated with these banks because they just can't answer a question straight. They beat around the bush. They just lie by omission and outright. But he keeps bringing it back to, force them into at least a semi-admission that this ain't no consultation that they're doing.
The Commonwealth Bank, they own you. Why can't there be some assurance for these customers who are facing the circumstance that they have by virtue of the decision that you have made, and I'm sure Commonwealth Bank aren't necessarily completely ignorant of all those processes themselves, that they're not worse off?
Yeah, again, Senator, that's absolutely our intention is to, through one-to-one conversations with our customers, should they choose, and again, I'd reiterate to say that we hope to maintain our customers, but we completely appreciate that some will still see a face-to-face branch option as critical. We'll work to ensure that they're no worse off.
So, are you signatories to the code that was established in relation to bank closures that came out of the previous inquiry into this process, 2017, I think it was? The task force? The banking task force?
2021, I think. Or 21, 22.
So this is Rob Florey. We adhere to the ABA branch closure protocols, which were obviously amended as a result of the recommendations of that task force.
So just make sure I heard you properly. You adhere to the CBA's protocols?
No, sorry, Senator. The Australian Banking Association, the ABA, the branch closure protocols that are in place.
So you have undertaken impact studies and statements in relation to this for each of the locations where you're closing a branch?
Yes, and as per the protocol, we will be publishing branch closure impact assessments and providing those to customers and their colleagues and the community as per the protocol. As we engage each community and each customer group within an area where a branch is impacted.
Can I just the Chair, Senator Matthew Canavan here, on your website that lists the branches closed, the only one that has a impact statement for it at the moment is Kununurra. Why isn't there impact statements for the other branches that you've decided to close?
The reason being, Senator, is essentially we're in a consultation phase at the moment with our colleagues on the impacts. Once we exit that consultation phase, we will then be informing customers where branches are due to close in the first phase of closures directly. We'll be writing to them and we'll be sharing the branch closure impact assessments. Essentially, what we've made is an announcement on on our strategy and confirming our growth plans with a transition to a digital bank. And the next phase is to move directly to informing customers and communities of the individual closures, confirming the time frame of each individual closures, and sharing the information with respect to alternative ways to bank, but also the branch closure impact assessment.
So just let me get this right. You were doing the consultation, you're saying the consultation phase is happening after you've made a decision to close the branches. Is that right?
The consultation phase is occurring following an announcement on our strategic decision in relation to the future of our branch network. We've now entered a consultation phase, and the next phase after that is we move to directly informing impacted colleagues, impacted customers and communities.
Yeah, I think it's a corruption of the English language, with all respect, to call it a consultation phase now, given you've already made the decision, gone over that. I'd say it's also an insult to those of my colleagues and others who, in good faith, engaged in the banking task force recommendations, because there is no way that the intent of the idea to prepare impact statements was that the impact statement be prepared after the decision has been made. Because what I'm hearing here is you haven't finalised these impact statements, yet you've made a decision to close the branches. That's not consistent, in my view, with the task force recommendations. Am I wrong in the process here that you've outlined to us?
We haven't published the impact assessments. We're due to publish the impact assessments for the first phase of branch closures. Once we finalise consultation with our colleague base, we have a number of colleagues who are impacted by this decision, and we're working through with them in the consultation phase to explore alternative options for them in terms of career pathways within the CBA group. We're very much focused on retaining our colleagues, and that consultation phase is a really important part of the process.
Do you have impact statements for all of the branches you've announced that are closed, even if they're in draft form?
Senator, it's Scott here. That's just a point of clarification, because in case that there might be some confusion. We have a consultation phase that we need to enter into around our colleagues, which precludes us from announcements of specific dates around branch closures. And then in line with those announcements, also in line with our ABA protocols, we'll be releasing the announcement dates, but also impact assessments.
There's two issues here. Well, I just want to return to my question, because time is limited and you haven't engaged in my question. Yeah. But, okay, let's go to ones. Mount Lawley, due to be closed, 7th of March, did get closed last week. Was there an impact statement? Is there an impact statement available on it?
I'll have to check if the impact assessment.
Take that on notice. Success, 21st of March, is there an impact statement on it?
Again, Senator, we'll
take on notice. Wembley, could you take that on notice? Due to close 14th of March. Tomorrow. Because there's nothing. So Wembley's closing tomorrow. I mean, I would have thought you'd know if there's an impact statement done or not. Have you done an impact statement on Wembley?
Senator, I'm pretty confident that where we are required to produce an impact statement, we'll have published the impact statement.
Well, it's not on your website right now. As I say, Kununurra is, but the others are not. And it's closing tomorrow. Is the consultation phase on Wembley still open, given it's closing tomorrow?
No, the consultation phase on Wembley has concluded.
Okay. Could you take on notice too? I'd like all copies of your impact statements on all of the branches in their draft form, if you could provide those to the committee. Thanks.
So, Elisa, you can see why it's important that our supporters continue to hit the banks and the MPs about their banks. It's feeding into the inquiry more and more. There's a lot more to be done, though. You know, we're starting to get. I think the senators are starting to realise that the public bank option is a necessary thing, but we've got to keep pushing forward. That's why it's going to continue. It's going to continue for the next two hearings in Canberra and Parliament House and in Bribie Island, so people can participate in those. Mm-hmm. Get along, just be in the audience, because it says something to the senators. Yeah. You know, that there is enormous support in the public for this.
And it's also worth, if your senator has participated in these hearings, it's definitely worth congratulating them on that effort, because they need, for this inquiry to proceed in recommending or even supporting a public bank, for instance, they're going to need to know there's massive support for it, or they just won't do it, because they're breaking all the codes of neoliberalism to go in this direction, and it is tough on them.
And talk to your local member, your local lower House of Representatives member. The point is that they need to know about what this campaign is. We're coming into an election next year, right? We're a bit over 12 months out from a potential election. It might be under 12 months. So the politicians, these members, they're starting to get a little bit antsy about what their position is going to be on certain things.
Oh, sure.
Right, and therefore let them know, because they may play a pretty straight poker face.
Yep.
But believe you me, if you front them in their electorate office or send them an email or call them up, they'll listen. Their staffers will listen, at least if you can't get onto them.
Yep.
But it's very important.
It'll get back to them.
It'll rattle.
Now that is a factor that we're going to talk about now in our next topic, the Gaza Effect, because this is something that, and this is not specific to Gaza per se, but it's a phenomenon where reality hits, and around the world it affects politics, regardless of what kind of country you're in, autocratic, democratic. I mean, it makes no difference, because the world is changing in such a dramatic fashion. It's impinging upon the usual course of events.
And this is not controllable by the institutions.
Yeah,
you know,
that usually try to control
politics.
politics.
Look at the United Nations being completely hamstrung. Every time a resolution's been put up, it's been vetoed by the United States. So
right.
you see, what you begin to see is some sort of an impotent organisation. You're saying, well, why can't these people do anything? It's because you look at the US internal political situation, right, and Biden, right, could stop the Israeli war tomorrow by stopping military action. By stopping sending ammunition for the military action. Could be cut off within 48 hours. But he won't do it.
And the hypocrisy of that, with the US being this country who supposedly stands for, human rights and freedom and so forth, is really glaringly obvious. And I want to put up to highlight it, this image. These are satellite images that were commissioned by CARE International of the Gaza Strip, and they were taken by Chinese satellites from a Chinese laboratory. So you see Gaza on 14th September before October 7 and the resulting reaction from Israel. And so you see the strip all lit up, and then you put up this 1st January picture, and it's March now, right? That was the 1st of January, but look at the different, there's nothing. There's a couple of flecks of light, and that's it. And that they've done detailed analysis even showing, because this is overall showing a reduction of nighttime lighting by 84% in that comparison there, 91% reduction in Gaza City, but the analysis goes down to the level of, for example, hospitals. So 70% of hospitals display no light on the Gaza Strip at night time. So, there's just no power. But the devastation, people have probably seen some of the latest pictures coming out of so much of the Gaza Strip just reduced to complete rubble. The death figures, the fact that people are drinking sewage water, they're eating animal food. Those are the lucky, those are the people that haven't been horribly injured or killed. This is shocking people. This is creating an effect. And you see one of the examples of this in the election victory of George Galloway on the 29th of February in the United Kingdom, in a seat in the Manchester region, and we've written about this in our Australian Alert Service. He declared that the major parties are paying the price for enabling this Gaza catastrophe. And I'll just show a very brief clip of what he foreshadowed here.
This is going to spark a movement, a landslide, a shifting of the tectonic plates in scores of parliamentary constituencies, beginning here in the North West, in the West Midlands, in London, from Ilford to Bethnal Green and Bow. Labour is on notice that they have lost the confidence of millions of their voters who loyally and traditionally voted for them generation after generation.
Okay, so that's what you see. This is not restricted to the UK. Anthony Albanese has become the first Western leader to be referred to the International Criminal Court for complicity in genocide over this last week or two, referred by over 100 Australian lawyers. So these are big effects, and I want to also reference the fact that, people like George Galloway, Rishi Sunak came out, inferring that he's basically anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, which is the line that comes out. But former British Ambassador Craig Murray came in a 12th March article for Consortium News with an article saying the panic of the British ruling class. And he said, that trope that you're anti-Semitic is gone for all money because of what has happened to Gaza here. He talked about the leadership of Jeremy Corbyn, who he said represented a very great opportunity to completely change, as we had said at the time, for dramatic change in favour of policies for the people. Remember, the slogan for his campaign was for the many, not the few. So, and he was, campaigning against the banks and so forth. Well, he was destroyed, as Craig Murray said, by an entirely fake narrative of anti-Semitism, which had no basis whatsoever. But as Murray said, now the Israeli genocide in Gaza has collapsed this type of narrative. It is gone for all money. And this is something that also was a very big topic, particularly the hypocrisy of the Western states, at an event that you and I and many people from this office attended last Saturday, put on by the Assange campaign, titled Night Falls in the Evening Lands. And it opened with Mary Kostakidis, SBS veteran journalist, talking about this horrifying genocide in Gaza and how it's changing the narrative. You had the director of New York, the former director of the New York office of the UN Human Rights Commissioner, Craig Mockaber, who, again, he said, this is not a world lighted by the rule of law. This is nightfall, highlighting the intense hypocrisy of the Western states that are imprisoning Assange for putting out the truth about their wars and what their wars have created and the horrors that have emerged, as we're seeing with Gaza. But he said there is a righteous rumble building in the heart of civil society, and it is growing every day. We had as many other speakers. We don't have time to go through it all, though we'll put a link below to our report of the proceedings, and the videos will be available, and we'll certainly alert our viewers when those videos are available because they're well worth watching. But I did want to add Yanis Varoufakis, the former Greek finance minister and political commentator, was there, and he agreed when Robert Barwick put a question to him about how we really have to put the heat on the members of parliament, just as we've done with our other campaigns to get the release of Assange. They have to feel it, particularly in the lead up to an election period, which our election has to be before the end, I think by September next year, something like that. And he absolutely agreed. He, in fact, himself said we have to target the marginal Labor electorates, which was already what we have been focusing on and which we'll refine and tell you more about as time goes by. But yeah, Varoufakis said we have to put the fear of defeat into these politicians.
And that's what's happening in the US, Elisa, because when this charade, this puppet show between Trump and Biden is happening. When Biden's the primary came up, the recent primaries came up, 100,000 people just in one primary, one set of primaries voted uncommitted on this issue, and they weren't Arab and Americans; they were just normal American people. And that sent a huge message to Biden.
Well, it was right after that he made this decision about opening some new ports and doing some food drops. It's nowhere near enough, but you see the impact that can make.
And that's the key here. Is that when people move en masse, which is what you're seeing with the George Galloway election, when people start to move en masse and affect the political and ruling classes, nothing can stop them. But the question is to get people moving first and foremost.
That's right, and that was also highlighted by one of the speakers there at the Assange event, Alistair Crook, a true expert on the Middle East, Britain himself, he said we are in an extended period of revolution. The thing is, though, that can lead to civil war, or that can lead to beneficial change, and it's leadership like what we represent, our supporters out there, the other institutions that we work with, but also what I was really taken by at this Assange event was that the cause of getting Assange out of prison and bringing him home to Australia, bringing him back to his family, has gelled a very distinct leadership movement. And many of them people like Julian's father, John Shipton, extraordinary fellow who's about to turn 80, who's all over the world constantly. People that have risen to the occasion. Julian's wife, Stella, she wasn't at that event. But many of the people at this event, and Yanis Varoufakis made this point, are from all kind of different political layers that would never agree with each other on anything. But as we've seen in our bank campaigns too, something like this rises above all of that spectrum of things you can disagree on. So you've got a leadership movement coming together that will make sure that this period of revolution moves in a positive direction.
Yeah, it was an incredibly high quality event. The speakers are very, very good. I found their contribution to this whole thing absolutely excellent. I found the focus on the idea of the American empire, but it's actually a British, American, Anglo-American empire, really stunning, because in effect Assange is a victim of this new American, Anglo-American empire. And what we see with his treatment is exactly what you can expect when you challenge the power of this empire.
Yes.
And it's vicious, right? And what side are we on? We're on the side of the attacking Assange, because we haven't done enough.
Australia,
Yes, okay, our politicians, majority passed a resolution in the Parliament, bring Julian Assange home. It should have put spine into the Prime Minister,
well,
right? And to say, listen, if you really value our relationship and this AUKUS thing, send Assange home.
Give us Julian.
Give us Julian,
a number of speakers said that. And I want to just, in closing, reference, and we'll put a link to this below, an article coming back to the Gaza Effect and the import of this. There's an article in the Australian Alert Service this week, the explosive dossier that exposes the end times Temple Mount plot driving the genocidal war in Israel-Gaza. And we've referenced this report, which is a lengthy, hundreds of page long report before on the show. We did a whole segment on it right at the beginning of the year. But we've now got this summary article which we wanted to pull together to put this into a chewable and consumable form to get this out en masse. So do have a read of that and circulate it. And I also wanted to foreshadow that tomorrow Robert Barwick will be back, and he will be interviewing one of the authors of that report. So stay tuned, because next week we'll have a Citizens Insight show, and this demonstrates the decades-long plot that has been taken up in earnest by a number of absolute fanatics in the government of Israel, a select group of individuals working with people in the US and the UK. This takes it back through the whole history to show these end-timers are happy to precipitate Armageddon to bring about this prophecy that they want to see fulfilled on this holy site for Islam, and even provocations during Ramadan and so forth are acceptable, because they literally want to create full chaos to seize control of this area. But
this is in the backdrop of, Elisa, what's happening in the US, the fact that the US is spending more money than its economy is generating, so it's going backwards fast.
Yeah.
You've got a whole commercial real estate bubble about to blow in the United States, a $20 trillion commercial real estate bubble about to blow, because there's an enormous number of properties and loans and stuff that have to be rolled over, but you've had increased interest rates, you've had declining property values due to changing commercial real estate demand because of people working from home. You've got the derivatives bubble, which is out of control, right? So you have all of these issues domestically in the United States, and the only way it's surviving it now is by spending close to $1 trillion a year in supporting 750 military bases in 80 countries.
The war machine.
The war machine and the industrial military complex. So this is all coming, you know, these Armageddonists wouldn't mind blowing up the world if they're going to lose their financial system as well.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
the problem.
Yeah. So we have to put the solutions in place,
Yep.
and they're all there for you. Go to our website to find out more. Contact us, give us a call. But thanks for tuning in. Thanks, Craig.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa.
And we'll see you again next week.
Authorised by Robert Barwick, Citizens Party, Melbourne.